Hi, Casey. It's really good to have you on the show today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, it's really cool when I can bring on a fellow, life and sobriety coach, as you refer to yourself. I like to say alcohol-free life coach myself, but we do both very similar things by helping people get freedom from alcohol. But I'm so curious. I would love to know, like, where you got started. What was your journey, and when did you decide to reevaluate the role of alcohol in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been following you for a while and just a fan. So I love the work you do. I feel like we're sort of on the same wavelength in terms of how we view alcohol, in terms of how it fits into your life, and that it doesn't have to be the biggest deal in the world to stop drinking and define you. Um, yeah, so I quit drinking about 5.5 years ago. It'll be 6 years in February, so which is crazy. It's coming up. And before that, I was a very dedicated red wine girl. Like I literally referred to myself as a red wine girl. That was my jam. I had always drank, sort of since college. And I just kind of thought it's what adults did. It was, come home from work, open a bottle of wine, proceed to drink it through dinner and then after dinner and watching TV. And later when I had kids, after I got them to bed. And so, I kind of always drank 7 nights a week, 365 nights a year, unless I was trying to be quote unquote good. It oddly didn't seem that unusual. It was just part of, I had wine with dinner. It was my favorite thing. I met my husband when we were in our first job out of college when we were 22. We just hit 19 years married. So we've been together a long time. And it was just sort of part of our relationship. We would go out to wine tastings, we'd go on pub crawls. He's not a huge drinker. He still drinks, but typically he'd have one beer or two when I would have three and still want more. And so, at various times I kind of realized that I was drinking too much for a while. It was sort of in the back of my head, but I also wasn't fully conscious that the anxiety I was feeling and waking up at 3 a.m. was all part of it. I mean, of course, like feeling like total crap in the morning and hangover, like I got that was associated with drinking and not remembering everything, but didn't sort of realize how it was affecting my mental health. So yeah, I probably worried about my drinking for a good 8 to 10 years before I finally stopped, not before my first attempt. But, I remember when my son, who's now 13, was 6 months old, I read the book Drinking a Love Story with Carolyn Knapp, read it while drinking a glass of red wine. And there's like a big glass of red wine on the cover. And I was like, oh, yeah, everything she's describing in the first chapter is everything I felt like. How much I love drinking, how important it was to me, how much it sort of lit up my brain. And so I worried about my drinking then and started to try to control it and make all the rules so that I would never have to stop drinking. That was sort of my absolute worst case scenario in life. And for a number of years, just was on that awful Groundhog Day of like, I'll switch to white wine because I don't like it as much, or I'll only drink when I'm out, or I'll only drink when I'm home. So I won't drink and drive to, have too much, or I'll only drink on the weekends. Like none of that worked. And I would always go back to, by the end, I was drinking a bottle of wine a night, sometimes more. And yet climbing the corporate ladder and in theory functioning well, I was working really, really hard to hold it all together and had two kids. I had a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old when I finally stopped. Yeah, drinking a bottle plus a wine a night, director at L'Oreal, married, kids in sports. Like it was just all the things. And yet not remembering the end of TV shows, waking up feeling like garbage, anxiety off the chart, mentally trying to keep everything together. So, I had been in some of the secret Facebook groups for years. I had, done read all the quit lit, and finally at a 3 a.m. wake up, someone recommended a sober coach. And I reached out to her, and that was sort of my last day one 5.5 years ago. And after working with her and learning so much about alcohol and what works. And I really look at it through the lens of behavior change, not the disease model, not there is something wrong with you. Just this is a truly addictive habit that's everywhere in society and incredibly hard to break. I decided that I wanted to be a coach too. And I went back to coaching school, and sort of the rest is history.
Wow, that's so incredible, your story, how you shared it like that. And there's so many things I want to kind of unpack there before we move forward. But something that strikes me is that like I have a book coming out myself, and I had to do a lot of research for it, and I was really interested in kind of the sociological aspect of drinking and how it's something that really has been governed by our culture and cultural norms, and how some of the changes that have happened in recent decades have, increased our drinking levels compared to before. And you mentioned that like it was such a normal part of your day, and there was such a like, well, that's what you just do. You drink red wine at the end of the day. In like the 80s, I was reading that Americans drank more Coke, more soda than they did drink
Yeah.
wine, right? And then in the early 2000s and the last kind of like 20, 30 years, we had this huge shift, right, into wine. And it really became this culture with moms, with mommy juice, with like this false sense of like being a connoisseur, like, oh, I
Yeah.
know my wines, right? And so I think that's just so interesting because now you'll hear from people who drink, like you say, every day, but in their minds, if they're not aware of it yet, it's like it's not a big deal at all, right? Because it's become so normalized. Do you feel like you saw that shift in our society from like the 70s, 80s to like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, my parents kind of always know, literally no one in my family has a problem with alcohol except me. And it was kind of like I was always like, I played rugby in college. I love to drink. Like we did the kegs. It was always part of my social life. But growing up, my parents were in the foreign service overseas. They were US diplomats. And so dinner parties and hosting, different people at sort of fancy events and wine was always part of my life. I was always listening to, when I'm 8 years old, my parents would have these huge parties, and I would always hear all the glasses and all the bottles and all the laughter. And it was sort of like how I associated, like, that is a good time. That's sophisticated. That's exciting. That's fun. Other people's parents go hiking. That was not my parents, and so that was kind of what I grew up with. I first of all cannot wait to read your book. I'm so excited about it. And one of the reasons is I was actually in love with sociology in college. I just love how society shifts and impacts behavior with whatever the cultural norms are and what the forces are that impact that. And I went into marketing. So I was in brand and consumer marketing for 20 years before I became a coach, and worked at Starbucks and L'Oreal and a bunch of companies where we had 50-page decks every year on our consumer, what they bought, what they interest in, what words appeal to them, what their identity was, what messages test well with them. And that's exactly what the beer industry, the wine industry, the sort of flavored hard alcohol industry has been doing for 20 years, right? They shifted from the empowered, woman, career woman of the 80s, which of course we all still are, but they shifted from that to sort of female bonding and girlfriends and mothers and independence and sort of rebellion from just being a mom or being in service to your family. And that stuff works, right? They're hiring mommy bloggers with little kids and paying them $10,000 to do posts and stories about alcohol. And it's real, it's powerful. And I feel like we're in this like circular firing squad, and I am not judging anyone because I was right there in it. I completely bought in to this is what moms do to relax. This is perfectly okay. This is how we're still fun. But everybody drinks it, in my friend group when I was drinking, a lot of them still do. We drank at mommy play dates. We drank on camping weekends. We drank with everything. We went out to brunch and got mimosas. The joke was like orange juice just for a splash of color. Like, don't put too much in. And so it was part of it. But if you ever said, I really feel like I should cut back on drinking, everybody said, no, don't worry about it. You're fine. Just have one. It's no big deal. So there was a lot of discouraging of cutting back on your alcohol intake as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that a lot from, different women I work with, that they'll be talking to their friends or even sometimes mental health professionals. And I'm always so amazed. Like, they're like, no, you're fine. It's not a big deal. And it's like, well, I guess in our minds, we have this kind of like a scapegoat of, like, I like to say Nicolas Cage from Leaving Las Vegas. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but
Yeah.
it's like hard and bad. And there's just liters and liters of tequila. And we have that scapegoat. And as long as you're not that person, you know what I mean? It's like completely fine, and then,
Yeah.
and then I love how you discuss like the promise, this false promise of connection and even rebelliousness.
Yeah.
All companies are trying to get at with motherhood. And I want to kind of dive deeper into your story. So you mentioned that, like, I think it's super typical, when you reevaluate the role of alcohol in your life. This is what I did for years, to drink less, and making these kind of rules around your consumption levels. And can you kind of explain to the listener? I think it's important to go through that phase, because obviously it's kind of a first step to be like aware that you're not happy with the problem. But compared to like when you actually took a break from alcohol and just cut it out, like, why is it easier sometimes to just go 100% cutting it out, even for just a short period, versus, trying to make this drink less phenomenon work for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are a couple different reasons. And I always, when I work with women, recommend that we sort of have a joint goal of getting them to 100 days alcohol free. And there's a reason for that, right? I mean, women go through very predictable cadence of sort of ups and downs within their first 100 days. A lot of women I will try to only drink 2 nights a week, or I'll try to only drink on the weekend, or maybe I'll do a 30-day, reset kind of idea. So like, I won't drink for 30 days, but then I'll go back to it. And there are 2 things involved with that. One, and I just read Dopamine Nation. Have you read that one?
Not yet. It's on my list.
Oh my God. And I just interviewed last week the author of it, Anna Lemke, on my podcast, which I'm having you on. And she really perfectly described the way that alcohol withdrawal happens, and that the first 2 weeks are really difficult. I mean, you're going to be irritable and sensitive and depressed and sleep poorly. And you will very physically, your body, when you consume alcohol, spikes your dopamine so high that your body compensates. So you don't just go back to baseline when the hangover wears off, you go below baseline. And you don't have that dopamine in your system. You need to get away from it to reset. So if you're just trying to drink 2 nights a week or on the weekends, you are literally constantly going through the absolute worst part, physically, mentally, emotionally, over and over and over again. And you are irritable and annoyed and craving. And the only way to get away from that is to have a longer period of time without alcohol. And, women will say to me, like, I'm actually a nicer mom when I'm drinking. I'm happier when I'm drinking. I'm more relaxed. My spouse likes me better. And I'm like, yeah, you don't dislike yourself in sobriety. You dislike yourself in withdrawal. You know what I mean? In early sobriety, you don't even know how good you're going to feel when you're sleeping through the night and suddenly feeling optimistic and don't wake up talking crap about yourself because you're like, oh my God, I'm the worst mom. I'm the worst person. Why did I do it again? Get myself together. So that's one reason to like get it out of your system for a longer period of time versus quote unquote moderating. Another reason is it takes up so much mental and emotional space. I mean, we spend so much energy thinking about drinking, thinking about not drinking, worrying if we have enough, worrying if we're drinking more than other people, worrying if we're going to feel bad in the morning, saying I'm never going to drink again, then saying, rationalizing, I'm not that bad. I don't really have a problem. Like, the amount of chatter in your brain is insanity, even when you're trying to moderate and kind of holding it in check. And then the other reason is when you go longer. I mean, even if you go 30 days, the first 2 weeks are awful. They just are terrible. You want to drink, you feel annoyed. The second 2 weeks, you're basically counting down to when you can drink again. Like, the carrot is drinking. So you never get away from that, like, reward cycle of like alcohol is the reward. But someone described it as well. If you go 100 days, it's the difference between taking a commuter airplane flight, DC to New York, versus flying cross country from DC to Seattle or San Diego or Hawaii, right? Short commuter flight, you're just sitting there waiting for it to be over the entire time, right? You probably don't even get a drink out. You're like sitting up. You may not open a book. You're just like, I'm getting on, I'm getting off. And then if you're going cross country, you kind of settle into it. You bring a book, you might bring a blanket, you're, reclining your chair, you're enjoying the process. And that's what a longer period of time without alcohol is. You actually get to see how good you feel on a Saturday morning on day 35, or you get to go running without a hangover. You get to experience a holiday without drinking and actually enjoy being clear and present and not obsessed. So does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I love that analogy. I was thinking sometimes like, when you fly internationally, especially, it's like long, but you get sleep, there's movies, like you just know what the experience, it's like, it's its own event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas you're right, like those short flights, you're just like, when is this going to be over? Even though it's way less time. It's such a great way of putting it, because I feel like that can often happen definitely for that shorter time frame. And I loved how you shared kind of the science of the the neurochemistry going on. And we've been talking about that a lot lately, because I think, any woman who's starting to question this role of alcohol in our life, like that first initial urge is to just like, let's just drink less. Let's just put this in a smaller box, let's just
Yes.
make it smaller in my life. And, obviously everyone has their own journey. And I think that is a phase we all kind of go through. But, we've been kind of doing a lot more pieces about why, like, it's actually easier to take a
Oh my
break.
God.
It's
It's
so
so
much
much
easier.
easier. Like, you are working so hard to keep it in check, just every moment of every day, rationalizing it, deciding to, trying to control it, like all the things.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so true. What you mentioned about the dopamine is that like a drinker is at this like low state time, and then they drink, they get this high, and then they crash. And that's just
Yes.
their every day or every week. Whereas you have to give some time for that to rebalance. But then a non-drinker is at this like elevated state all the time, right? And they might have
Yeah.
ups and downs, obviously, too, but it's
I
really
mean,
like,
you are not imagining it if you drink regularly that you are happier when you are drinking. I mean, the next morning you feel like utter garbage and, regret and all that stuff if you drink like I did. But your brain does light up and you do get that dopamine hit. And, Anna Lemke described it as like anything hits your dopamine higher. So, like, cigarette, chocolate is like 50%, you get the dopamine hit. Nicotine is like 150, opioids are like 1,000%, but you are spiking it up there and your body compensates. You think you're making yourself happier. You're actually taking your baseline level of contentment and peace and joy down as sort of a permanent lowering until you get away from it.
yeah, so true. So tell me a little bit more, like we finished right when, all things changed when you decided to get some support, and, obviously it worked really well. And now you're here leading the woman behind you and with you. But what did those like first 100 days look like for you? What was like what kind of did you need to make sense of? What did you need to do to make it finally successful for you? Because I'm sure it sounds like you tried before. So what was it
Yes.
about this time that worked?
I was always like, it was not my first rodeo, you know, and that's often the case, right? Women a lot of times can be like, I've tried before, it never works. Why bother again? And I think for every single one of us, one, I would say nobody who loves to drink actually wants to stop drinking. You want to feel better. You want the negative parts of it to go away. But I think what stops a lot of women is like, well, I actually don't want to stop drinking. And I'm always like, yeah, of course, I get it. You don't actually have to want to stop drinking to get a longer period of away from it. And it's at that point when you get some distance that you actually desire it less. It's sort of like a magnet, right? The pull is really, really strong when you're close to it. And then as you get away from it, you get some more perspective, some more distance. You're like, yeah, I don't want to feel that way anymore. I didn't realize I was walking through the world feeling like garbage every day of my life. And so, I mean, what worked for me? Number one, just signing up for a 100-day challenge, not saying forever, not saying never again, because when I started, I couldn't get more than 4 days. And I was doing well, I'm only drinking a bottle of wine every 4 days, which is way better than 7 days. So, like, hashtag winning. I'm like doing awesome, right? But obviously was still not. I was only, basically kept doing that early withdrawal period over and over again. So 100 days to me in the beginning seemed impossible, but I basically signed up for it at a really low moment. I was like, I cannot keep doing this again. I'd recently come off of a lovely, amazing vacation in Arizona in February with my 2 little kids and my husband, and it was gorgeous. And I was trying to, quote unquote, quietly throw up red wine in the bathroom attached to our room at the age of 39 with my kids in the next room. And I was just like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm a little too old for this. And this is embarrassing. I'm sure my 8-year-old can hear me, like my husband, and then trying to play it off like it's no big deal. So I just come off that trip. And then another night I was drinking on like a Tuesday night, and I turned on the TV for like Scandal. And my husband was like, you watched this last night? I was like, nope, did not. You're wrong. And he was like, no, you did. And I was like, whatever. And I did not believe him. I got to the end of the episode and one part was familiar, like at the end of the hour. And I was like, oh my God, my brain literally did not record an entire hour of something. And I was just like, okay, I need to stop. So I didn't want to stop drinking. I didn't say forever. I was like, this is a health kick. I had a coach which helped me draw a line in the sand, meaning a start date. I think paying her actually helped, as opposed to being like, I love the Facebook groups. I love group things where you're like, yeah, today's my day one. But it's so easy to be like, well, I have a party this weekend, or, well, it was a really hard day, or I've got a business trip. So actually paying someone and being accountable to them and being like, all right, I'm doing this, helped me. I also did not spend a lot of time debating if I was, quote unquote, that bad or an alcoholic or had a real problem. Instead, I was just like, I want to get healthy. I want to see how good I can feel without alcohol. I wonder how much I can accomplish in 100 days alcohol free. And so it was all positive and forward looking. And then my coach and I, during the process, she really held my hand through the entire time. And that's what I do with women I work with too. We have the coaching sessions, but I also text and email with them every day. So a lot of this is like block and tackling, right? You're going to a restaurant with friends. Okay, you're nervous about it. You need to think it through. You wonder what to say to them. What are you going to order? How are you not going to like go through the entire night feeling jealous and pissed and like this isn't a big deal and it's not fair? How do you treat yourself afterwards? How do you reset your mind to focus on what you want? And that's just a dinner out. Like in early sobriety, you're doing a lot of emotional work. What do you do when you have a horrible day at work and you don't drink? What do you do when you're resentful of your spouse, or your kids are being a nightmare, or you're anxious about a presentation? All of that, we've gotten used to wine as like the easy button, as our single only coping technique. And you really need to expand your repertoire of options you have to realize that I can get through the night. I can entertain myself without alcohol. I can get through anxiety. I can deal with anger and like that whole emotional piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you explain that. And it sounds like there's so much to the art almost of like leverage, in like your journey. And like leverage is a good way to say it. Commitment is another good way to say it, because this like I want to, or this like I want to try it, or day one, let's see what happens. Like all of it is just doesn't sound sustainable. The social event will come up, or just the day that you deserve it, you go 4 days without drinking, you're like, whoa, I deserve a reward now,
Yeah.
right? But there's something to this piece about leverage, which I think is really important wanting to change your life almost in any way, right? Because the leverage, like when you signed up for the coach, or you spent the money, or you committed to this time frame, no matter what happens, it kind of like binds you. And I think
Yeah.
I think that's speaks to, it's not so much that the things we've tried before, like we can't do, or we're not capable of, or like things are hard. It's sometimes like at our level of commitment. Like if someone put a
Yes.
gun to your head, or, was threatening you to like you'd lose your children, or, just some really crazy kind of hypothetical situation. I mean, I bet you we could do like a million more things than we ever believed we could, right?
Yes. Well,
And
and
so
it's
that,
also, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, please, no, please.
Well, I was going to say, in my mind, it's the same thing as like hiring a personal trainer or hiring a nutritionist, right? Like there is something that you want to achieve that, of course, you could do on your own, right? Of course, you could go and lift weights and do run training or whatever, but you aren't. You just aren't. You need the accountability. You need someone to hold your hand. You need someone to talk to once a week. You need them to check your logs, whatever it is. And so we actually hire people all the time to help us achieve our goals that we aren't able to achieve on our own, even though we are smart, capable women who can achieve anything. And it's sort of like making a commitment to yourself, as opposed to letting your boss and your kids and your spouse and your laundry become the most important thing in your life. It's so easy to be like, yeah, I should stop drinking, which means I need to do all these things to take care of myself so that I'm not like at the end of the day, at the end of my rope. But instead, I'm going to drive my kid to soccer and then do laundry and then answer these emails. And like we satisfy, I think Gretchen Rubin, if you know her, she has the 4 tendencies. She wrote a couple books, The Happiness Project, and she calls it the obliger personality, which I completely am, meaning you're more likely to complete tasks and goals for someone else than you are for yourself.
Yeah. I think we've been trained to do that almost. Like, I know some people have that tendency more than others, but it's like we get good grades at school. So our teacher, our peers, our parents can be proud of us. It's like this external accountability that we often need, and for me, I personally, like, my leverage was like saying a commitment was like, I'm going to not drink for this period of time, no matter what. And even though I had like tried to drink less in the past, like I had never raised the stakes that high, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to not do this, like that would just, I'm going to do this no matter what. Right. And, I think about anything we've set our hearts and our minds to, it has to have that level of leverage for yourself, or else it just won't happen. I also
Yeah.
really love how you suggest that, like, you don't really need to want to stop drinking, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
the way that I like to say it is that, like, basically, when you think of quitting forever, it's like deciding to get married without even meeting the guy,
Oh
right?
my
It's like,
God, that's perfect.
obviously you're going to get cold feet. Like that's not that's not the way we do things, but then because you're scared of getting married to this guy, which is obviously, very like a logical reaction, you don't even let yourself go on the first date.
Mhm.
And if you just went on the first date, and then even the same thing when women get to like 1 month or 2 month alcohol free, all of a sudden this whole quitting question comes up again. Like, do I need to quit forever? And it's as if they decide like either have to quit forever or I go back to drinking. And it's
Yes.
like, well, if you were dating a guy for 2 months and it was going well, why wouldn't you just keep dating him? You don't have to decide to get married.
I love that. That's perfect. I know, because I'm always like, see how good you feel when you get to 100 days. And, because milestones trip you up, right? 30 days, 50 days, you can have like post acute withdrawal syndrome hit between 60 and 80 days where you just sort of feel like crap for a while. But you get to 100 days, and most people are amazed at the night and day difference in their mood, their energy, their relationships, their bloating, their body, like all the things. And then I'm never like, okay, all right, fine, you're going to quit forever. You're in or you're out. Like you were saying, it's like, okay, I feel this good at 100 days. I want to see what 6 whole months feels like. Like I've done 100, what's 80 more? By that time, I want to achieve XYZ. And then you get to 6 months and you're like, hell, I think a year is a great, like, what if I could do a whole year alcohol free? Or if that's too much, let's go 8 months, or your next birthday or the new year, whatever the big milestone is. And you sort of keep moving those goalposts. But I always say, like, the goal is not to just not drink, right? My goal is to only not drink. That's the only thing. No, not drinking is the foundation that gets you unstuck so that you can do all the other things you've always wanted to do in your life, but you've been like running a marathon with a ball and chain tied to your ankle, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I share, really deeply with you is like, I don't even care about the beverage at the end of the day. It's not about a beverage, it's about being alive to your life. And obviously with your story, like you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today. You completely changed careers,
Yes, I did.
and it was all because of this, alcohol-free life change. And it seems like, well, obviously she did because now she's a sober coach, but think about it, like you could have gone into anything, but you just decided what I was doing before is not as fulfilled as I could be. And I want to have a big greater impact with women or, and you wouldn't have gotten to that point if say you started drinking again at 3 months or even
Yeah.
6 months. Like you needed to go through those alcohol-free days in order to, get that confidence, get all of that clarity, the intuition, the inspiration to move forward and look not only how different your life is because you don't drink, you do something completely different for a living that's super fulfilling,
Yes.
super fun, makes you an independent kind of income. It's incredible.
Well, and also, like, I think a lot of women drink, and I work mostly with like working moms, right? Sort of successful corporate working moms. And I think what happens is you mentioned like at school, like a lot of the women I work with, and I totally identify as sort of people pleaser, overachiever, gold star girl. Like we want the A's, we want the pat on the head, we do what, and yet, so you keep climbing the corporate ladder, and yet you're not happy. Like deep down, you're like gritting your teeth, you're anxious, you're stressed. You're like, is this what life is supposed to be? So your reward is alcohol, right? That's your carrot at the end of the day, your what you get for getting through to Friday, what you get for like doing the laundry and the homework and the dishes after working all day and then jumping on email afterwards. And the issue is that once you remove the alcohol, you're suddenly have more energy, have more confidence, have more clarity, and all the reasons you drank are still there. And in order to not go back to drinking and be happy, you kind of have to be like, wait, this isn't working for me. And this isn't working for me. And it's a choice because you have power. So for me, I was, director of e-commerce, climbed up the ladder, was really stressed out, did not want to live my life going on business trips and in hotels and, doing work on Thanksgiving weekend because it's Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And once I removed drinking, I was like, this isn't fulfilling to me. And by the way, I'm not stuck, you know? And so it doesn't have to be obviously sober coaching. That's what I did. And I didn't even originally want to be a sober coach because I didn't want to be defined by it. I wanted to be a life coach basically for working women who weren't happy with their lives, which is pretty much every woman I know in corporate America and all my friends. But I actually figured out that working with women who want to stop drinking is like both way easier and way more fun, because when you remove alcohol, you have to get vulnerable and honest, and it also impacts every single area of your life. I mean, it touches on your identity, your friends, your marriage, your work, your fears, your insecurities, your family. You get so deep. And then it's like this huge weight comes off your shoulder, and you were like doing life with this huge backpack of rocks. So you take that off. It's like, all right, what do we want to do now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful. And that's like the ability to see that with my clients, has been some of the most fulfilling times of my life, because it's like it's these phases that you go through. Like, first you're getting this freedom and you're growing in your confidence and stuff. But it's like it's this concept I like to think of, like we drink out of our uncomfortable emotions, or ways to kind of like numb things down. And you could deal with stress and then drink every single night for your whole life and never change anything.
Mhm.
But when you take it away, like you said, like you're left with that kind of realization, like, is my lifestyle making me happy? Do I enjoy what I do? Do I enjoy my relationships? Am I fulfilled? And it gives you those emotions to actually process through and work through. And something that's really cool that I found is oftentimes I'll find that women, so, I mean, totally depends, let's say 50-50, but some women have like no idea. Like they just never allowed themselves to think about it. It was like, just like the code you said before, like normal adults have to drink. It's like normal, adults have to have a 9 to 5, have to work in a corporate job, have to pay the bills, have to move up the corporate ladder without ever asking yourself, well, what do I want? What
Yeah.
do I want? What is way more fulfilling to me? And so there can be a really cool period of time as well, not in addition to all the other transformations you're having, to actually just like look within and discover, like, what do I enjoy? What
Yeah.
lights me up? What gives me passion? What would I love to learn more about? And I think that's like, to me, that was such a like I grew so much in that time frame,
Yeah.
so much, because
Yeah.
I had kind of allowed myself maybe a little bit to dream of it, but honestly, it was like off limits. Like, Karolina, as long as you live this life, you're not going to be able to have that life.
Yeah.
So I
You
really
really
didn't let
feel
myself.
trapped, and like, you know, some people call it the golden handcuffs, or just, I mean, it's like, well, yeah, sure, I don't like my job, but I have kids and a mortgage and responsibilities, and I signed up for this and need to save for retirement. And once you remove the alcohol, you realize that you don't need to like throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's more smaller calibrations of how you spend your time, money, and energy and your focus. And you start to edit your life to what brings you more happiness and brings you more meaning. And you don't realize how much time drinking sucks up, where you actually have way more time and energy and frankly money once you stop drinking than you used to. So I mean, I was barely coping with my life when I was drinking. I felt like I was at the end of my rope and anything would break the camel's back and all the things. I stopped drinking. And about 2 years later, first year, I was like just figuring out how to navigate. Second year, I was all focused on joy. I was just like, I'm going to go to on this trip and that trip and vacations and, redo my bedroom and take up guitar and run a 10K. Like that was year 2 for me. After that, I was like, what else do I want to do? So I talked to my husband and said, I kind of want to go to coaching school, and like, best case scenario, I'll love it. And this will be like my next 20-year career. Worst case scenario, I get a year of personal development, meet some amazing people, whatever, get more insight into myself. And he finally looked at me and he was like, because I was sort of asking him for permission, which again is something that I've grown out of. I don't really ask him for permission anymore. I just kind of like consult him because obviously he has a stake in what I spend my time and energy on. But he was like, babe, you're 42. At what point do you get to do something just because you're interested in it? And I was just like, wow, yeah, I'm going to go to coaching school and pay this money and take this time simply because I'm interested in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's such a like rebelliousness there and almost like unapologetic sense of your own authenticity, because all the other stuff we do, like you said, I think there's this theme of like people pleasing or doing it for, some kind of external recognition. And that's kind of, I know so many people who went to college or did this career for that, like, well, this will make my parents happy. And then this will look good on a diploma. And then this will be great in the corporate ladder, this next position. And those things can feel like easy, and we're good at them because they're hard, right? But
Yeah.
we do them because we know how much social status maybe we get from them, where it's these alternate things that are just really coming from our souls that feel like, oh my gosh, like who am I to think I could do something like that?
Yeah.
And you're right. I love how your husband phrased it with with just looking you at your age and your life and being like, what are you living for then, if not
Yeah.
to live your life the way you want to live it?
Like, when are you going to give yourself permission to do
Yeah.
something you want to do? And not the shoulds, right? I mean, you're a loving, smart, responsible person. You're not going to let down your colleagues or your boss or your kids, but at the same time, you're allowed to carve out something for yourself. You're not just in service to others. And so, I felt resentful when I was drinking. I felt trapped. I felt like a martyr. I felt like I couldn't take a vacation. Wine was what I had. That's what I got for the result of my days. And when you get away from it, you're like, God, that's a really kind of sad little reward. Like, you're really taking the dregs of the coffee there as like what you get. And you don't realize that's a choice.
That's so powerful. And so, all of this took so much evolution of your mind. And obviously, you've had so much of your own personal development. Now you work with other women as a coach yourself. I can see how like it's almost like this mindset has been shifting and evolving to get to where you are today. And it's just so beautiful to witness and be able to have this conversation with you. But walk me back for just the last question before we end today. Like you didn't know any of this on your day one. And
Yeah.
all you knew was that you had this commitment that you made. You signed up for it with a coach. Like, what actually got you through like those first 30 days?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a guide on my site that's like 30 tips for your first 30 days, which is all of my best tips. But in the beginning, I think it really is set your goal and I'm not drinking tonight or I'm not drinking this week. Like, write it out. So when your 100 days are, and then break it down, right? If you always break on day 4, your goal is really day 5, day 6, day 7. In the beginning, it really helps to think of this as a health kick, right? Think of this as I'm getting these toxins out of my body and I'm truly going to take care of myself. So that means sleep and good food. Does not mean diet. You're going to crave sugar. So I'm always like, do not go on a Whole30 diet in your first 30 days, because you're kind of like, you're going to be like, it's all too hard. And you can't figure out if you're miserable because you stopped drinking or you're miserable because you're not eating enough or whatever it is. But that doesn't mean don't be healthy. It's just don't go on an extreme diet. But I always recommend like sober treats, like get yourself a treat every single day and tell yourself, this is my reward for being sober. And that can be amazing coffee in the morning without a hangover. That can be sushi takeout on Saturday night. That can be a massage when you would usually go out to happy hour. Just you're changing your habits. You have a goal. You tell someone about it. Like you said, the external accountability. I mean, I told my husband, my coworkers, my morning workout group, my girlfriends that I was doing a health kick and that I wasn't going to drink for 100 days. And I think absolutely 0 people believed me because I had tried before and I'd always been like, oh, never mind, not a big deal, like the backtracking. But because I had my coach, I stuck to it because I was like, nope, I said I'm going to do this. And she sort of held my hand through, like, I'm sleeping terribly. I want to drink. What do I do on Friday night? And a big part of that too is getting the alcohol out of your house. And I know that's hard. I know a lot of women are like, I can't do this. my partner's drinks. It's not fair to them. This is my issue. I don't want to make a big deal about it. I mean, every, resistance is going to pop up to this, but it's so important to succeeding because it's like this cue to drink. I mean, I always think of like if you have a wine bottle in your fridge or on your counter, it's like having a birthday cake on your counter for a week when you're trying not to eat sugar. Like it's insanity. You're like setting yourself up to fail. So, I asked my husband, "Hey, can you not drink in the house for 30 days? Go out with your friends, have a beer before you get home, whatever. But I am going to like literally want to wring your neck if we're sitting around on Saturday night and you're drinking beer and I'm like feeling bereft that I don't have it." So having his support was big. You can do it if your partner won't stop drinking, but I feel like it is not too much to ask. Like when you try to eat healthy, my husband's eating, pork loin and green beans. He would rather have a burger, but he does that. So I'm just like, it's the same thing. And then just take it day by day and be proud of yourself every step of the way, right? Oh my God, day 9, I slept amazing. Oh, I went running on Saturday without a bottle of wine in my belly. That was pretty effing great. I watched a movie and I did not, quote unquote, fall asleep on the couch. And I remember it all. I actually made it to yoga on Saturday morning, whereas the 3 previous weeks, I was like, never mind. Like that's all great stuff to focus on.
Yeah. Oh, it gives me like joy to even remember like how amazing those small wins are because they're huge. They really are huge, and you deserve to honor them and treat yourself. Like you said, I love that idea of having something to look forward to every single day that you get to treat yourself because I mean, no matter what, when you're doing this, it's like you're doing something you've never done before, And I think whenever you do that in life, like it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal that you're doing that. You're showing up for yourself and it's not all going to happen overnight, but it's like one baby step one day after the next. You build something really incredible from that, this beautiful foundation. So thank you so much, Casey, for sharing those tips. And where can people find you and where can people find that guide you talked about?
Oh yeah, it's on my website. It's hellosomedaycoaching.com. So someday is SOMEDAY. So hellosomedaycoaching.com. And my podcast is the Hello Someday podcast. And Karolina is going to be on it soon. And I can't wait to have that conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your light today.
Oh, thank you.